You are sitting by a fire. The year is 40,000 years ago. The sun went down hours ago, and the world outside your small circle of orange light is completely, totally dark. There are no phones, no books, no television, no ceiling to stare at. There is only the fire, the people beside you, and the endless, stretching night that will not end for another 8 or 9 hours. You cannot sleep yet. Your body is not ready, and so you sit, you listen, you think, you talk, you create. And right now, in this moment, surrounded by darkness and warmth and other breathing human beings, something enormous is happening inside your mind and your community. Something that will change the entire direction of the human species forever. The question is this: what exactly did ancient humans do with all that darkness? And did those long sleepless hours after the fire was lit actually build the civilization we live in today? Most people assume ancient humans slept the moment the sun went down. It sounds logical. No electricity means no light, means sleep, right? But in 2015, a researcher named Jerome Siegel at UCLA published a study in the journal Current Biology that turned this idea completely upside down. Siegel and his team spent months studying 3 groups of people who still live without electricity today. These groups lived in Tanzania, Namibia, and Bolivia. They were called the Hadza, the San, and the Tsimane. These communities are among the closest living examples we have to pre-industrial human life. What Siegel's team discovered was shocking. These people did not fall asleep at sunset. On average, they stayed awake for 3 to 4 hours after dark every single night. They did not wake up at sunrise either. Their total sleep time was actually shorter than what modern doctors recommend, averaging around 6.5 hours. But here's the important part. They were not sleep deprived. They were healthy. They were alert. They were functioning perfectly well. This means the idea that humans are supposed to sleep from sunset to sunrise is not ancient. It might actually be a modern invention. So, if ancient humans were awake for hours after dark, what were those hours doing to them? Polly Wisner is an anthropologist, which means she studies human societies and behavior. In 2014, she published research in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, one of the most respected scientific journals in the world. Wisner spent decades studying the Juhoan Bushmen of the Kalahari Desert in Africa. She recorded and analyzed hundreds of conversations. What she found was a clean, dramatic split. Conversations during the day were almost entirely practical. People talked about food, work, complaints, and chores. But conversations around the fire at night were completely different. At night, people told stories. They talked about distant places and people they had never met. They discussed right and wrong. They imagined futures that did not yet exist. They performed songs, dances, and rituals. Wisner calculated that daytime talk was about 68% practical matters. But nighttime firelight conversation was about 81% storytelling and the kind of deep social talk that builds trust between people who are not related to each other. Building trust with strangers is one of the foundations of human civilization. Without it, you cannot have trade, alliances, cities, or governments. The firelit night, according to Wisner's research, may have been the original classroom for the social skills that made complex human society possible. Think about what this actually looked like in practice. A child sitting by the fire would hear a story about a hunter from a neighboring group, someone they had never met, someone who lived days away. Through that story, the child learned that this stranger was brave, or honest, or generous. The next time travelers from that group arrived, the child already trusted them a little, simply because of a story heard years earlier in the firelight. This is how strangers became allies, instead of threats, one story at a time, night after night, for tens of thousands of years. The brain does something very specific in firelight that it does not do in sunlight. Andrew Meltzoff and Patricia Kuhl, neuroscientists at the University of Washington's Institute for Learning and Brain Sciences, have studied how human brains process social information in different states of alertness. Firelight creates what researchers describe as a soft, shifting, low-contrast visual environment. Your eyes relax. Your brain shifts out of sharp focus problem-solving mode. What activates instead is the default mode network, which is the part of your brain that handles imagination, empathy, self-reflection, and the ability to understand what other people are thinking and feeling. Scientists call this lastability theory of mind. Theory of mind simply means the ability to imagine yourself inside another person's thoughts. It is one of the most advanced things a human brain can do, and it is central to everything from storytelling to compassion to legal systems. Ancient humans, sitting awake in the soft dark hours after sunset, with their default mode networks fully activated, may have been running the most powerful social software ever developed every single night for tens of thousands of years. Here is where this becomes physical, where you can actually see the evidence with your own eyes. The cave paintings at Lascaux in France, dated to approximately 17,000 years ago, were painted deep inside caves where no daylight ever reached. The same is true of the famous paintings at Altamira in Spain, dated to roughly 14,000 years ago. These artists crawl through narrow tunnels, sometimes hundreds of meters underground, carrying small fat-burning lamps to work by. The light those lamps produced was soft, flickering, and orange. It was firelight. Researchers, including archaeologist Ian Davidson, have pointed out that the placement of many cave paintings takes advantage of natural rock surfaces in a way that firelight dramatically amplifies. Bumps and curves in the stone made the animals appear to move when a flame flickered nearby. These were not just pictures. They were animated experiences, designed specifically for the soft, shifting light of fire in the dark. The long, wakeful nights did not just produce conversation, they produced art. Picture someone crawling on their hands and knees through a tunnel barely wide enough for their shoulders, holding a small stone lamp filled with animal fat, the flame no bigger than a candle. They are doing this not because they have to, but because something inside them needs to leave a mark in the dark. That single small flame was enough light to plan, to paint, to imagine an animal leaping across stone that had never moved a single inch in its existence. There is a second piece of this that almost nobody talks about. Sleep researcher Russell Foster at the University of Oxford has written extensively about what he calls biphasic sleep, which simply means sleeping in two separate chunks instead of one long stretch. Historical records from medieval Europe, studied by historian Roger Eckhart and published in his 2005 book At Day's Close, Night in Times Past, show that people routinely woke up in the middle of the night for 1 to 2 hours before sleeping again. Eckhart found references to a first sleep and a second sleep in hundreds of historical documents across multiple languages and cultures. The hours between these two sleep periods were not seen as a problem. They were treated as a sacred creative window. People prayed, had conversations, made love, reflected on their dreams, and thought through problems. Some historians and sleep researchers now believe this middle-of-the-night wakefulness is not insomnia. It may be the original human sleep pattern, the one our bodies were designed for. The anxiety that modern people feel when they wake at 3 a.m. might not be a sign that something is wrong. It might be the ancient brain trying to do exactly what it was built to do. Pull all of this together. Ancient humans spent hours every night in a neurological state that was uniquely suited to empathy, imagination, and storytelling. They used that state to build social bonds with people outside their immediate family, which is the foundation of all cooperative civilization. They created art in deep darkness, encoding knowledge and identity in images designed to be seen by firelight. Their sleep patterns included natural waking windows specifically suited to reflection and creativity. And according to Siegel's research from 2015, this was not unusual or accidental. It was the default human condition for tens of thousands of years. The night was not empty time to be endured. It was the engine room of human culture. Here's the conclusion that almost nobody draws from this research, and it matters deeply for the world we live in right now. We have spent the last century treating the night as a problem to be solved. Electric light was supposed to free us from darkness, and in many ways it has given us tremendous gifts. But it also collapsed the firelit hours. It replaced the default mode network activation of soft evening light with a sharp, blue-tinted screen glow of phones and televisions, which keeps the problem-solving brain switched on long past the point where ancient humans would have softened into story and reflection. What we may have lost is not just sleep quality, which researchers, including Matthew Walker at UC Berkeley, have extensively documented in his 2017 book, Why We Sleep. What we may have lost is a daily ritual of collective imagination. The nightly window where human beings sat together, activated their deepest social and creative brain networks, told each other stories about who they were and what mattered, and built the invisible architecture of shared culture, trust, and meaning. Depression, loneliness, and the collapse of shared community are among the defining crises of modern life. Ancient humans were not smarter than us. They were not stronger. But every single night, without choosing to, they gathered in the dark and did something together that stitched their world into a whole. The fire is still inside us. The question worth sitting with tonight is simply this: what have we stopped building because we forgot how to sit still in the dark? Subscribe to The Buried Layer, a new story buried in history, every week.